The show Freaks and Geeks is a show that's near and dear to my heart, being another in a long list of shows that I've seen multiple times throughout my life, and I'm not alone in that either. The show has gained a cult following since its run on television in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and it's been credited with launching several careers of some really famous actors. This includes Seth Rogen, James Franco, Jason Segel, and a lot more. A lot of these well-known actors found their start on the same show from the early 2000s. Sites like Rotten Tomatoes have Freaks and Geeks receiving a 100% rating from fans, as well as a 9.67 out of 10 from critics, along with Time magazine ranked the show third on their list of greatest shows of the aughts, while TV Guide has ranked the show in the top 25 best cult shows ever. Entertainment Weekly has given the show 13th best overall series in the past 25 years, so the show has clearly struck a chord with viewers and remains to this day one of the best shows ever produced. But these rankings are all on lists from magazines and websites. That only shows me that the people that watched this show really loved it. What about critics and the people who run award shows? I don't usually put much weight into what critical reception a given show or movie receives, but even in this regard, Freaks and Geeks again receives high marks, having won 1 Emmy to go with 3 nominations. Along with that Emmy, they've also been nominated for 2 and won a single TCA award. So the show is all but unanimously loved by critics and fans alike. Why then did the show only air for less than 1 full season? That's right, as I'm sure anyone who's watched Freaks and Geeks already knows, but for those of you who don't, Freaks and Geeks won all of those awards and has such a strong following all these years later off of only 1 season. What happened? How could a show do so well with everyone who saw it, yet still get cancelled before the first season was even finished? Running from September 25th, 1999 until July 8th, 2000, Freaks and Geeks aired a total of 18 episodes. Following the 18th episode, NBC decided to pull the plug and cancelled Freaks and Geeks with 3 episodes left to go in the season. The show was replaced with Dateline in the Monday night lineup and shelved entirely, citing poor viewership ratings. The show's creators attempted multiple times to have the show ran on a different network, or just to be picked up for a second season in any capacity, but the closest they ever came was talks with the WB. Although they held several meetings, in the end Warner decided against picking up the show. Freaks and Geeks stayed cancelled, never being picked up for another season. The show's popularity only grew after its cancellation, with the show having been ranked number 1 on several different lists of shows having ended too soon. I've always wished that the show would have ran for more seasons, and I've always wondered why it didn't. I mean, how could the executives at NBC be so blind and not realize the phenomenon that they had on their hands? Well, it's not that simple. Or maybe it is? I don't really know, but I'm going to take a look at this, and I'm not going to do it using the numbers, awards, and ratings I've already used in this video. My reasoning behind this is that these are all subjective and only really shows how the show was received by those who actually saw it. Instead, I'm going to use the ratings they received regarding viewership numbers, as these paint a much clearer picture of a show's overall success and their shortcomings. See, Freaks and Geeks appeared on NBC, which has in the past been quick to pull shows that were not performing up to expectations. And that was the case here as well, with NBC having shows like Frasier and Friends each pulling in an average of 14 million viewers per episode. The meager 6.7 million that Freaks and Geeks received each week just didn't seem good enough. To go along with this, the show performed poorly when compared to other shows in the same time slot, with ABC's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in the top slot pulling in an outrageous 29% of viewers from the 18 to 49 demo, totaling almost 30 million viewers per episode. For comparison, Freaks and Geeks landed in the 107th spot, while failing to even pull in 8% of the same demographic. Freaks and Geeks just couldn't establish a large enough audience to warrant being aired on a major network like NBC. See, of the top 125 shows on the air in the 1999 to 2000 season, only 7 aired on networks outside of the Big Four. Only one of these networks managed to even have a show crack the top 110, with the World Wrestling Federation SmackDown landing right before Freaks and Geeks at 106. So while NBC's decision to cancel the show might seem rash and idiotic considering the fanbase it's accumulated since its cancellation, for the market climate at the time, it was actually a pretty solid choice. But was that it? Freaks and Geeks didn't pull in as many viewers as expected, so the show was over? Well, sadly, yeah, that's what happened in this case. Like I said earlier, Freaks and Geeks was only on for 1 season. The actors and writers separately moved on to other projects and all found individual success following its cancellation. But I don't think it needed to end this way, so abruptly and without any real closure. Remember earlier when I said that they held talks with Warner after the original cancellation? Well, that's just it. Warner definitely could have and should have picked them up right then and there. It's one thing to debate the show's potential and say, look at all the love and viewers Freaks and Geeks has now. Surely at least one more season would have been the right choice. But I don't even need to do that to show that WB acquiring them would have been the valid and profitable move. See, the late 90s and early 2000s were a very different time than today. Take the highest viewed show of 2019, NCIS, which pulled in 15.3 million viewers per week, accounting for a total of 12.75% of overall viewers. This is vastly lower than the near 30% Who Wants to Be a Millionaire received just 20 years earlier when Freaks and Geeks was airing. Like I said, the Big Four ruled cable television and dominated the ratings. But outside of those four, the network that pulled in the next highest ratings was Warner, which took 18 spots from the 110 to 150 range. Their top shows, Seventh Heaven, Charmed, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, received an average rating of 5.7 and around 5 million viewers per episode. And the vast majority of these viewers for the shows landed in the 18 to 34 female demographic, almost 3/4 of their overall viewership. Freaks and Geeks as well actually had the vast majority of their viewership landing in that same demographic, taking up almost 80% of that 7 million viewers they pulled in each week. This makes the show a perfect fit for the WB and would actually give it the highest ratings across the entire network. NBC clearly didn't want the show anymore and would have willingly let the WB take the show over. While it's notably rare for a show to switch networks and gain viewership, Freaks and Geeks didn't even need to do this. They had higher viewership numbers than any of the shows on the WB, meaning that if they even managed to pull in similar ratings to before, then Freaks and Geeks would have been a reliable program to anchor the Monday night lineup, which was notedly weak on the WB. Featuring mainly Seventh Heaven episodes, it could have been bolstered by the more popular Freaks and Geeks, which obtained more total viewers with 1/3 of the total airings. The cost to produce the show is also lower than Seventh Heaven, which makes it a pretty obvious choice when you look at it from the data that they had available to them at the time. I mean, for less money and less time slots, the WB could have gotten more viewers than their top performing shows were ever able to pull in. And I mean, that's really the easiest choice and the one that makes the most sense to me given the statistics from that time. But hey, that's only one of the ways this amazing show could have been saved from the fate that it ended up receiving. Are there any other ways that you can think of that could have worked and saved this awesome show? Or maybe you think that the show was so widely beloved because we just never got enough. That the hole in my heart left by Freaks and Geeks and the knowledge that I will never get to see more causes me to cherish the episodes I do have to a much higher degree than I would have if it was different? Well, yeah, probably, but that doesn't change the fact that Freaks and Geeks from a financial standpoint would have been a good, if not great, move for the WB and everyone else involved. Nostalgia can't replace raw statistical data. It's just, in this case, nostalgia and statistics both agree. Freaks and Geeks was a great show which more than earned a second season. Just probably not on a major network like NBC or Fox.